All right, this is a test. It's probably a take one. I was listening to Dr. Johnson, and he was talking about his media test. And there's a story he mentioned about an interview that was done by the mayor of New York. It was a black mayor. And the reporter that was interviewing him slash debating him was disrespectful. Now, I haven't even seen the interview, but I've seen this before. I've seen this when we talk about interracial marriage, like when Kamala Harris was running for vice president, and they told us that if we had something against Kamala Harris for being married to a white man, then we need to work it out in the therapy and not at the ballot box. And that just goes to show that they can cow black men. Same thing with the other reporter. I can't remember her name, but she told us to not side with the oppressor and get behind black women and vote for the Democrats. At that particular time, it was Stacey Abrams, excuse me, because she was running for governor, and there was a question about what would Stacey Abrams do for a black man, particularly for a black man, which is a constituency, which as the voters they had a right to ask for. But then, since we weren't satisfied, we couldn't vote our conscience and vote for somebody else that would suit our needs and suit our policy, which is what we're supposed to do, pick our own representative. We evidently weren't allowed. And so it kind of reminds me of the things that I've been hearing from all the PhDs that are in the circle, plus other PhDs and people in certain organizations that aren't in the circle that have to deal with black women not only in their personal life but also on the job when they're supervisors or they're HR workers or even co-workers and in the academy, which is a high school, okay, college and whatnot, right? Where they have to constantly be at odds against black women, suppressing what they can say, suppressing their thoughts, suppressing what they can actually teach. Because I know of 2 or 3 professors that have been fired for teaching the truth. That was uncomfortable to black women. And that suppression has gone on for at least the last 50 years, maybe even longer, where there's only certain things you could say. After the Monahan Report and Kenneth Clark with Dark Ghetto, a lot of that stuff was suppressed by black women. And a lot of the colleagues of Dr. Clark didn't come to his aid because they're afraid of losing their jobs. Because white women had black women's back and they could lose positions that they've worked so hard and so long to attain. So it's a chilling effect. And that's what they're used to. That's what you hear when the pro-blacks and intersectional feminists come over here. They think they can shame us and use that chilling effect to squash debate and squash speech and opposition speech and the discontent that they know that black men feel because they feel it too. But the thing is, they can't lose their position. They can't lose the access to wealth, access to money that's filtered through the black women. Just like the Oracle in The Matrix. What did Neo say to Morpheus when he came back from meeting the architect? He said, Oracle is just another means of control. Even though it's a friendlier means of control, even though the Oracle looks like you, she's still another means of control. So now when it comes to the manosphere and the black manosphere especially, I just did a video how the last 14 years, according to the World Economic Forum, there's been an opposition to the matrix and the social order. And the feminists are at a loss to how to control it. They can't control it. They can't shame you back into the pocket. So now they're trying to appeal to other men that are sympathetic to their cause to talk to these men and try to get them to reason or try to make a deal with them or try to get them back in the fold. They're trying to they're trying to sell the same message. There's a certain kind of man that we want, and they're not adhering to it. They're not adhering to the so-called environment that we created. And this manosphere, especially the black manosphere, shout out to Kevin Samuel, shout out to Passport Bros, is causing extreme disturbance in the matrix that can't be handled under normal circumstances, because most of these guys that are with us, they're in the shadows for a reason. They can't see them. They're online. Even though they can feel the influence, they can't see these guys. And the people that are out front, that are the face, that happen to be the visible part. In other words, we're the tip of the iceberg. We're not the whole iceberg. That are lifting up the sheets, that are telling the truth. We're a problem. We're a problem that cannot be managed. And they think that they can pull the same shenanigans on us. And they've tried with YouTube, censoring YouTube, unsubscribing people, not only me, but others, and try to retard our growth. They don't want to outright get rid of us, because that would be dangerous. They just want to slow our growth down. So they've been trying and trying and trying, and the black women have been doubling down on what has worked in the past. And what they fail to realize, that we ain't them. We're not the men that you have trained in, how can I say, collared and cowed into submission, that don't want to speak out of fear, of losing their position, because you didn't make us. You didn't make us. We didn't come to your systems. And the ones that have, they have found their own voice. And they notice that the pendulum has to swing back the other way. And that's the leading edge. And you know it. You know that it's a global problem. You know that what you have been doing is not working. And your thing is, if you continue to sell it right, then you convince these guys to accept the programming that you try to lay out for them that is negative against them. And they know it, because there's nothing in it for them. And if we don't wake them up, and we don't let them know that there's an alternative, then your chances of success are greater. But the only problem is, the manosphere, the black manosphere especially, we ain't them. You don't have a control over us. You don't have a control over our voice. You don't have control over what we can research and find. Or you don't have control over what we uncover that you don't want to be uncovered. You don't like us putting women, especially Western women, on blast, on video, telling the truth, and then flipping it and showing the rest of the people that's supposed to not see this stuff, so they can actually change their mind and change their worldview. You don't want that. You don't want them to change their worldview, because every time one man changes his worldview, it influences 6 others, and you know it. 6 degrees of separation. And the closer you are to the center, the more effect that it has. I told that to MGTOW, the MGTOW movement, back over 10 years ago, about mainstreaming and why mainstreaming was a good thing, because that's the whole point. I said you have what I call a refuse-nick movement. In other words, you refuse to participate in a system that's unfair. And if it's small, it's not that big a deal. You can recover. It hurts, but you can recover. When it's large, you're talking about systemic shutdown, and they know it. Even the women rebelling by saying that we're not going to have babies for the system if we're going to, so we can kick and scream and get our way. And the men, especially MGTOWs or monks or people going through this stage, are saying, you know what? I dare you. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go back to Andor with the one way out speech, right? There's only one way out. And what did he say? I'd rather die fighting it than giving them what they want. And that's what a lot of the young boys are saying, right? We'd rather die womanless than giving into this unfair system. That's what they're afraid of. In other words, there's nothing that they can hold over you. They can't lock everybody out of the system because they need workers. They need workers to support the system. They need men and husbands to have children to replace the bodies that die. And even if they don't die, the old folks are put a drain on the system because they can't contribute. Those take younger bodies, those take younger workers. That's why you see this rush to actually import as many of these immigrants or migrants as they can before it has an effect on the country where they're coming from. Eventually, they're going to take so many people, it's going to cause those countries to collapse. They won't be able to maintain their society. And at some point, that's going to happen. So for them to continue, because even when you bring migrants up, they're coming into this flawed system. And they're even less likely to agree with this type of unfair system that we have up in the West. They're even less likely to adhere to it. So the pendulum has to swing back the other way. And you can't cow us, you can't shame us, you can't bring us down, you can't beat us down, you can only work with us. Why? Because we ain't them. We ain't the lackeys, we ain't the simps, we're not the underlings, we're not the sheep that you've raised so that you can fleece, we're not the ones that you can yell at and embarrass and shame, talk about what a real man is, and you're toxic if you do this kind of stuff, because that stuff is wearing thin. In fact, it's worn out. In fact, if you speak this way, most guys don't want to even deal with you anymore. I'm just watching Black Ram, where the so-called boss chicks, the 92s, I call them the corporate class chicks that are successful and educated, they can't get approached. Why? Because they have been told that they're unapproachable. And now what are they telling the women? What are the dating coaches telling the women? You have to make them on first move. You got to say hi. You got to be friendly. You got to smile. You got to be open. You can't walk around with RBF. And the women that are complaining are the top 5 and 10% of females. They're not the fat, 250-pound project woman with 6 kids. These are the ones that have been trained to be feminists, trained to be independent, trained to not need men. How's that working out for you? And so what they're trying to do is kill the messenger that's carrying the message. Kevin, didn't stick around. His demise is tragic. When they try to plug in Andrew Tate, who's probably more harsh, you're trying to silence him to some moderate effect so that you can input the people that you want, so that you can lead us down a path that you want to lead us down. But guess what? We're not them. We're not those kind of guys. We don't have the same kind of mindset. We don't have the same kind of worldview. We're not them. So when you come on these panels, you come to our side, you come to talk to us. Remember, we're not them. We don't believe nothing that you say. And everything that you can bring up, we can counter it with research and history and real life examples, because you can't hide it. What you're trying to do does not work. Not here in the United States, not in Western Europe, and certainly not in the rest of the world. You have women around the world championing the sex strike, which is 4B movement in South Korea. You can do that, but you're going to doom your society to die. Your birth rate is already below 1 and dropping like a rock. That's your future. There's a reason that these systems that we built, whether it's a matriarchy or patriarchy, whatever you want to call it, has fashioned itself into something that's very similar around the world, because it works. It works for human beings. There's a reason for all this stuff. There's a reason for what we call gender roles, if you want to call it that. I call it sex roles. You just got here and you want to upend everything because you don't like your position. Fine. But you don't want to take the position that men have. Why? Because your biology doesn't feel it. And that's also what you're finding out, that the women that you want to put in leadership position don't want to do it. They don't want to be that. But they're fighting with your indoctrination versus their biology. And guess who's the loser? It's the women and also society. And so what do you fall back? You fall back and trying to shame Jermaine, then to taking the blame and taking up the slack and taking up the hit. Guess what? More and more men are saying, we ain't them. We ain't them. And going forward, there's going to be more and more men saying, we ain't them. Anyhow, that's all I got for this one. This is BGS out, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.